Welcome back to the program, everyone. My name is Dr. Dan. I am a pharmacist turned obesity expert, and today we are talking about my problem with weight loss medications. Now, I won't apologize for the clickbaity title by any means, particularly in a world where we are flooded with information. One does need to get creative, but I do have a genuine problem that I am seeing in the weight loss, weight management space with these medications. But before we dive into all of that, as always, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below so that you don't miss another episode when it comes out. As well, check me out on my other channels at The Official Dr. Dan. I'm on the Tick, the Talk, the Gram, the Book, the Face, you name it, I am out there. As well, check out my website, healthcareevolve.ca. In case you need some additional support, you can book a free consult with myself and see if you'd be a good fit to work with myself and my team. So the proper treatment of obesity has really been a long time coming. The Canadian Medical Association did not officially declare obesity as a chronic disease until 2015. That was only 7 years ago. And I mean, isn't that effing wild? And prior to that, obesity was classified as a condition of the lazy and the unmotivated, the ones that did it to themselves. And I mean, largely it is still seen as that in the general society and general public and even by insurance companies. But with that declaration via many health organizations across the globe, it is starting to get better, and we're starting to get that recognition that it is, in fact, a disease with a number of pathological underlying mechanisms. And in particular, as we are starting to see more and more treatment options coming to the market for obesity management, we're starting to see more and more clinicians getting more comfortable with managing, with prescribing these treatments and these modalities in order to help their patients to manage their weight. Now, when I first started practicing in obesity medicine just a few years ago, back in 2017, here in Canada, we had access to very few obesity or weight loss medications and modalities. First up, there was a drug called Orlistat, which to this day I have yet to prescribe because I will not be one that gets sued by causing a patient to have anal leakage. Yes, you did hear that right. In fact, anal leakage is one of the common side effects that can happen with the drug Orlistat. We also had Saxenda on the market at that time as well. However, a majority of insurance companies were not actually providing any coverage for it. And well, not many are actually even providing coverage for it now at this point in time. But it was nonetheless an option that was available if somebody could afford to pay out of pocket for the drug. So when I started practicing, we really didn't have many options. We didn't really have many interventions that we could provide short of looking at lifestyle and bariatric surgery. And what was really cool about this space is that since we were limited on the number of drugs and agents that we had available, we really needed to dig into the lifestyle intervention aspect of things and really start seeing how can we actually get people to change their behaviors. And that required looking at the emotional, the psychological, and all of the other factors that are currently going on in their life. And really, this is the stuff that we all talk about, we all know is so vitally important in terms of managing an individual's health, but no one wants to do it because A, it involves feelings, and feelings are yucky, and B, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of sitting, motivation, follow-ups to make it all happen and to make it effective. And part of what got me into the obesity space was that Obesity Canada and the drug company Novo Nordisk, the ones that make Saxenda and Ozempic, had collaborated to create a number of different materials, modules, certifications, all kinds of things like that in order to support and help clinicians in becoming proficient in managing obesity. I really went all hog wild with it. I loved all the material. I loved the psychological, the emotional aspect, breaking down an individual's behaviors and helping them to realize the changes that they need to make, why they were engaging in the behaviors that they were engaging in, and helping them to take steps in order to move forward. And in my practice, we were having some really tremendous success, not only in managing weight, but also in managing things like blood sugars, high blood pressure, you name it. I was really applying these different ideas and modalities to help people to change their overall behavior patterns. Now, the big problem that I'm seeing now with weight management is that as these newer agents start to come to market, we're starting to see a shift similar to that what we have in diabetes management, where there's often a limited focus on behaviors and lifestyle interventions and more of a focus on just getting individuals on agents in order to support them and helping them to manage their weight. And ultimately, we're starting to see this stacking of one medication after another. So we start with a GLP-1 receptor agonist such as Saxenda, Ozempic, or Wegovy, And then we stack on Contrave and we stack on this one, etc., etc. Now, before you start thinking that I've gone the way of Greenpeace, hippies, and naturopaths, let me explain my point here. So medications and technology has made tremendous progress over the years, including the COVID vaccine and the technology that has gone into that. We are likely on the cusp of another medical revolution in terms of what we're going to start seeing in terms of treatments and management of various chronic diseases. And medications and technology has saved countless numbers of lives and has allowed us as a species to live longer than ever. And people genuinely need medications in order to treat and manage their ailments, including obesity. So don't get me wrong, I am pro-vaccine, pro-medication, pro-Western medicine, you name it, I am pro and I am for it. However, let me tell you about the problem that I currently see in the management of type 2 diabetes. And we're going to do a bit of a thought experiment. So what we're going to look at is an individual that goes to their clinician, they just had some blood work done, and that blood work comes back and shows that their blood sugar levels are a little bit elevated, right? Maybe they then get the diagnosis of diabetes. Their clinician then says, okay, here's your prescription for metformin. Go away for 3 months, come back, we'll do more blood work and see where things are at. In 3 months, they come back, they haven't lost any weight, they haven't really made any lifestyle changes. They've been taking the metformin on and off because they were a little freaked out about it because their friend Joe from work said that they're going to die because they're taking it. They, of course, do their blood work again and shit, their blood sugar is still high. The clinician then provides them another prescription for an additional agent to take on top of the metformin. They're maybe given a little bit of a spiel to smarten up, reduce your carbs, get more activity in, and come back in 3 months. And the same cycle then continues for the next few years, maybe even the next decade or so, and additional agents getting added. Sometimes the blood sugars look really good, and then the blood sugar levels deteriorate again, another agent gets added, and so on and so forth. All the while, no lifestyle modifications or anything like that have really been made or even really been explained to the patient, and even their medications, they haven't really gone over in depth with their clinician. And maybe the patient has tried to increase their activity levels, maybe they've tried to reduce their carb intake or eat a little bit healthier, more whole foods and that sort of thing. But ultimately, the sustainability isn't really long lasting because, well, they don't even really know where to start and how to implement and how to go about it. And unfortunately, they reach a point where they have 4 to 5 medications on board, blood sugars are still high, and their clinician now has to have the unfortunate conversation with them that insulin needs to be initiated. We are essentially at the end of the line and everything else has failed. And at this point, the clinician then says, by the way, you're going to go down the hall and see Dan, and Dan's going to ultimately teach you about insulin, get you started on insulin, and hey, he's also going to go over some dietary and activity patterns as well. But by this time, it really is potentially too late for a lot of individuals. And what I mean by that is that some people can certainly make some very drastic changes in their life, and they might actually be able to come off of a number of agents, including the insulin. But many individuals are really so fed up with taking medications at that point in time, and they're so fed up with this whole chronic disease and never getting their blood sugars right and stuff like that, that they end up rebelling and either stop taking a number of their medications or just stop following up altogether. And we actually have a name for this. It's called diabetes distress, and it's been well documented to lead to poorer health outcomes. And when I finally sit down with this patient after they've had this disease for 10 or 15 years or so, and I'm going over how to start insulin, I then realize that no one's even taught them really what a carbohydrate is, what are simple sugars, what are complex sugars, what's a protein, what's a fat. No one has really gone over in detail what these various things are that they ultimately need to start knowing and would have been invaluable to them at the very start of their ultimate diagnosis of diabetes. In reality, they should have seen me a decade ago. When they got that first initial diagnosis, they should have been coming and seeing me for education and management in order to get their blood sugars on track and to give them some idea of what they can start doing and how they can get a handle on this condition. Unfortunately, that is just not the way that our health system works. And by no means is it the fault of the clinician or the pharmacist or anything like that. Our healthcare system has just been set up to be very reactive versus proactive. So the clinician, when they're seeing the patient, they have 5 to 15 minutes with them because of the demands of their practice. And so they don't have time to necessarily make the referral, to go over all these various other components of diabetes, even what the disease is. It's going to be a lot more bang for their buck to say, hey, here's a medication, come back in 3 months, we'll see where things are at, and we'll go from there. As well, there just isn't the supports in place where all clinicians could just refer their patients to me as soon as they get a diagnosis. Those supports and those programs are growing and somewhat, maybe not really, getting better, but they are still not there and available where a clinician can say, hey, you need to go and see Dan right now for diabetes management. And unfortunately, this is the picture that I'm starting to see develop in terms of obesity management as well. Instead of patients getting proper education, going through the pathophysiology, what are the lifestyle changes and things that they should be thinking about and focusing on, they are provided a medication and told to follow up at some given point in time to see if there was any benefit had. And like I've always said, these medications and agents we use for weight loss and weight management, they're tools in the toolbox. They're not a magic fix. They don't increase an individual's metabolism. They simply lower the barrier so it becomes easier to choose the apple over the apple pie. But if an individual doesn't know what the apple is that they should be going for, well, then it becomes a moot point and they get stuck again in this limbo of, okay, well, this drug is forcing me to eat less, which is great and fantastic. But if we haven't been able to put in and optimize our dietary patterns, our activity levels and stuff like that, eventually what is going to happen is they're going to reduce their calorie intake for a while, but eventually they'll revert back to many of their old patterns and behaviors and likely start gaining the weight back. And this is often the case that happens is the patient is given a medication, they go away for a year. Maybe in that first initial year, they lost 40 pounds, but at the year-long follow-up, hey, they're starting to gain some weight back, and suddenly they've gained 5 pounds. 6 months later, it's 10 pounds, 15 pounds, and the cycle goes on, and eventually another agent gets added on in order to try to help them to lose weight. Now, at this point in time, most individuals are really only put on 1 or 2 agents, and then they likely get a referral to bariatric surgery if they qualify. And hopefully at the bariatric program, they receive more intensive counseling and support and follow-up, but they also might not. And again, it might be too late at this point. We should have been capturing them a lot sooner in the care pathway in order to provide them with that baseline knowledge and education so they can start making changes to their overall lifestyle. And again, there is absolutely nothing wrong with bariatric surgery. It is a very effective modality, particularly for complex and severe cases of obesity. But again, providing that baseline knowledge is going to be so valuable in helping an individual get started in managing and looking at how they can start altering their patterns and behaviors. And yes, I definitely know that diabetes and obesity are chronic and progressive diseases. We expect them to get worse over time, absolutely. However, what we also know from the data is that more intensive education and follow-up can ultimately lead to an individual keeping their blood sugar stable and down, and keeping their weight at a more maintenance level for a longer period of time, which of course is going to ultimately lead to better health outcomes. So as I said, it is not the clinician's fault. We are working within a broken system where if you have 5 to 15 minutes with somebody, it's going to be a hell of a lot easier to prescribe a medication than trying to understand why an individual uses food as a coping mechanism. So it's fundamentally the system that is going wrong versus the individual clinicians. But we do know, and we have some really great data to show that if we can implement these intensive counseling and lifestyle programs within the primary care environment, we can greatly improve overall health outcomes. In particular, when we look at the Look Ahead study and the DPPP study, what we ultimately see is that intensive lifestyle counseling leads to better patient health outcomes and can be implemented in the primary care environment. So we have the data, we have the knowledge, we know that obesity is a chronic disease. Why the hell aren't we doing a better job? And there really is no single reason as to why. We are starting to see some shifts, but ultimately politicians are involved, and politicians, well, they're more focused on what's important for them instead of what's most important for the people that they serve. And not only are politicians going to be moving at a glacial pace, they're more focused on re-election at the next election, obviously. And to be quite honest, reactive medicine changes a lot easier and can see a lot more benefit immediately compared to preventative medicine. Preventative medicine takes time, years and years and years, to see the benefit of a program in that regard. Whereas reactive medicine and saying you reduced wait times for surgery is a lot quicker outcomes and a lot bigger space that you can have an impact, and you can say, this is the reason you need to re-elect me. So that really comes down to us, the providers that are on the front line. We are the ones that need to ultimately drive the shift and drive the ship in terms of getting us more towards a preventative versus a reactive medical system. We are getting better, but again, it is a large organizational system wide process that needs to be implemented. And we really need to get the politicians the F out of the way. And so while it is up to the frontline providers, it's still going to take a ton of work and it's going to be scary as hell. We have to have the frontline providers be willing to take the risks, to take and try something new, to go against the status quo. And that's going to be very tough when a large majority of healthcare providers don't have that entrepreneurial spirit. They don't have the drive and the passion that I do for wanting to take risks, for wanting to open up businesses and to challenge the status quo. And that is all right, but it's just going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of support and it's going to take a lot of patience to get where we need to go. Things are improving. Frontline providers, that's what we want to do. We want to provide better health care and better health outcomes for our patients, for our communities, for our societies. But it's going to take a lot of effing work. So, you beautiful people, that is a bit of my problem with these weight loss medications and these newer agents coming to market. It's fantastic that we have more tools in our toolbox, but we need to be thinking about the long term and what we're really striving for in terms of trying to improve the health outcomes of our patients overall and making it sustainable for the long term. If we can prevent that heart attack from happening in the first place, that is going to be way, way better for the individual and for our society as a whole. And as the old adage goes, if you build it, they will come. So that's it for today, you beautiful people. As always, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below and check me out on my other channels at the official Dr. Dan. As well, check out my website, healthcareevolved.ca, where you can book a free consult with myself. And until next time, you beautiful people, we will see you later.